You won't believe the nerve some people have, and this story still blows my mind every time I think about it. I live in a quiet mountain community, the kind of place where life is supposed to be peaceful and simple. You wake up to the sound of birds instead of traffic, you see deer instead of delivery trucks, and neighbors usually just wave politely and go about their own business. My house sits on a little rise overlooking pine trees, and just a short walk down the slope there's a guest cabin. From the outside, it looks like nothing special, just a rustic little cottage with a rocking chair on the porch and flower boxes under the windows. Everyone who drives by just assumes it's a cozy little getaway spot for when family comes to visit. But the truth is, that cabin isn't really a guest house at all. Years ago, after I retired from law enforcement, I made an arrangement with some old contacts. The FBI needed discreet safehouses scattered in quiet areas, places where agents or witnesses could stay temporarily without drawing attention. My cabin turned out to be perfect. It looks ordinary, it's far enough from neighbors to give privacy, and nobody would ever suspect that federal operations sometimes run behind those curtains. Most of the time it sits empty, and that's exactly how it needs to be. I never advertised its purpose, not even to close friends, because secrecy is the whole point. To everyone else in the neighborhood, it was just the cottage. At least, that's what I thought, until the day everything went sideways because of one woman, our HOA president, the one everyone quietly refers to as Karen. If you've ever had to deal with a power-hungry HOA member, then you already know the type. She was the kind of neighbor who always had a clipboard in her hand and sunglasses on her face, marching around like she was a general inspecting troops. She believed it was her personal duty to enforce every little rule, whether it was the length of your grass, the color of your mailbox, or how long a guest's car could be parked in your driveway. People avoided her because once she got going, she could talk for an hour about community standards. So imagine my mood when one morning there was a loud knock at my door, and standing there was Karen herself, dressed like she was about to attend a board meeting, pen poised over her clipboard. She didn't even bother with small talk. She adjusted her sunglasses, tilted her head like she was already irritated, and said, "We need to talk about your cabin." Right away my guard went up. My cabin? What business of hers was that? I stayed calm and asked what she meant. Without missing a beat, she launched into her demand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "My cousin is flying in next week," she said matter-of-factly, "and the HOA has decided that your guest cabin would be the perfect place for her to stay." I stared at her for a moment, thinking I must have misheard. Did she just say the HOA decided? She wasn't asking. She was telling me. I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was almost unbelievable. "Excuse me?" I asked, "Did you just say the HOA decided my cabin should be used for your cousin?" She nodded, lips pursed in that way she always did when she felt superior. "Yes. It's the neighborly thing to do. Your cabin is just sitting there empty, and community means sharing resources." Now, in that moment, a dozen responses went through my head. I could have told her flat out that it wasn't a guest cabin at all, that it was a federal safe house and there was no universe in which her cousin was stepping foot inside. But of course, that was the one thing I couldn't say. I was bound by an agreement, and blowing the cover could put people at risk. So I kept it simple. I looked her right in the eye and said, "No. The cabin is private property. It's not for rent, not for loan, and definitely not for the HOA to assign." Her lips pressed so tightly together they nearly disappeared, and I could see her composure starting to crack. Karen wasn't used to being told no. She huffed, clicked her pen, and snapped, "You're being selfish. Everyone else in this community contributes. If you don't comply, I'll bring this up at the next HOA meeting." Now, you need to understand something about Karen. When she threatened to bring it up at the meeting, she meant it like she was calling in reinforcements. She thrived on HOA drama, and she knew how to twist rules and guilt-trip people until they caved. But I wasn't budging. I crossed my arms and repeated firmly, the answer is no. That should have been the end of it, but anyone who knows a true HOA Karen knows they never drop things that easily. She turned on her heel and stormed away, muttering about selfish homeowners and community spirit, and as I watched her go, I knew this wasn't finished. That woman had a look in her eye that said she was already plotting her next move. The truth is, in that moment I felt torn between frustration and worry. On one hand, I was angry that someone thought they had the right to demand use of my property. On the other, I was nervous because she was dangerously close to poking into something she had no business discovering. If she pushed hard enough, if she started snooping or pressuring her way onto the property, she wouldn't just be annoying me anymore. She'd be stepping into federal territory without even realizing it. And the FBI does not play games with security. I tried to shake it off that first day, telling myself she'd probably get distracted with some other neighborhood crusade, maybe barking dogs or recycling bins left out too long. But deep down, I knew better. Karen wasn't the kind of person who let things go. The more you told her no, the harder she pushed. And with each hour that passed, I couldn't stop thinking about what might happen if she actually tried to act on her little decision. That first knock at my door was just the beginning. What I didn't realize then was that her obsession with my cabin was about to collide head-on with the FBI's need for secrecy. And when those two worlds clashed, the fallout was going to be bigger, louder, and far more dramatic than anything our sleepy little neighborhood had ever seen. Karen wasn't just any HOA member. She wasn't the type to quietly suggest ideas or gently remind neighbors about trash pickup. No, she treated the HOA like her personal kingdom and herself as the queen. She strutted around the neighborhood with that clipboard in her hand like it was a royal scepter, making notes about paint colors, grass height, or whether your porch light bulb matched the approved warm tone. People laughed about it behind her back, but nobody said much to her face. Why? Because Karen thrived on conflict, and she had the stamina to keep fighting until you gave up. So after that first encounter at my front door, I wasn't surprised when 2 days later she came marching up my driveway again. Only this time she didn't come alone. With her were 2 other HOA board members, let's call them Paul and Linda, both of whom had the glazed, tired look of people who had been roped into something against their will. I opened the door, and there was Karen standing like she was leading a parade, chin high, eyes narrowed. "We've come to discuss your cabin," she announced, as if I had invited them for a meeting. I sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "I thought we already discussed it." "The answer is no." Paul cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, Karen brought it up at the HOA committee, and she feels strongly that your cabin is a resource being wasted. Since you don't have family visiting often, maybe it could be put to better use." Linda chimed in softly, "It could really help the community, especially when people have family in town and no extra space." I crossed my arms. "It's my property. I pay the taxes. It's not a community cabin." Karen's lips curled into that smug half-smile she wore whenever she thought she was winning. "Actually," she said, flipping through papers on her clipboard, "there's a bylaw that says unused guest facilities can be made available for community needs upon HOA approval. So technically, you don't have a choice." That made me laugh out loud, and not the polite kind. "You just made that up. There's no bylaw like that. Show me where it's written." She flipped pages theatrically, then tapped her pen on a blank line. "It's right here. We're updating it." I shook my head. Updating a bylaw doesn't mean you can apply it retroactively to take my property. That's not how laws, or reality, work. Karen's face darkened, but she wasn't backing down. "You're being unneighborly. Everyone else contributes to the community. What are you hiding, anyway? Why does no one ever stay in that cabin?" And there it was, the dangerous question. I had to keep my expression neutral, had to keep calm, because the last thing I could do was slip and reveal the truth. My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my voice steady. Because it's private, and that's all you need to know. Linda and Paul shifted uncomfortably. They clearly hadn't signed up for this level of drama. Linda finally muttered, "Maybe we should just let it go, Karen." But Karen spun on her like a hawk swooping down. "No, we will not let it go. If we allow one homeowner to hoard resources, the whole community falls apart. That's how chaos begins." The irony was almost too much. Here was a woman talking about community chaos while she was the one barging onto my property, making demands like a dictator. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so it carried a weight of finality. "Listen carefully. That cabin is not for the HOA. It's not for rent. It's not for loan. It's not up for discussion. The answer is no, today, tomorrow, and forever." Karen's face flushed red, her nostrils flaring. She hated being challenged, hated being told no, especially in front of her fellow board members. And when Karen hated something, she didn't just let it simmer, she plotted. She jabbed her pen against her clipboard and snapped, "Fine. If you won't cooperate, we'll escalate. I'll bring this to the full HOA meeting next week, and I'll make sure everyone knows you're refusing to support the community." I shrugged. "Do whatever you think you need to do." She gave me one last glare, spun on her heel, and stomped down the driveway with her two reluctant board members trailing behind her. As they left, I caught a glimpse of Paul giving me a sympathetic shrug, as if to say, "Sorry, man, she's unstoppable." But what Karen said next is what made my stomach twist. As she reached the road, I heard her mutter just loud enough for me to catch, "If he won't hand it over, I'll just show my cousin the cabin myself when she gets here. I know the back way onto his property." That stopped me cold. She was actually threatening to trespass. This wasn't just about HOA politics anymore. If she tried sneaking onto my land, she'd walk straight into a situation she couldn't possibly understand. And if the FBI happened to be using the Safehouse that night, well, let's just say trespassing on federal property, even unknowingly, doesn't end with a polite conversation. I stood there on my porch long after they left, thinking through the possibilities. Should I call my FBI contact and warn them about this nosy HOA president? Should I try to put up extra locks or cameras around the cabin? But even as those thoughts spun through my head, I knew the truth. Karen wasn't going to let this go. She was a storm-building strength, and sooner or later, she was going to crash headfirst into something far bigger than herself. And I couldn't shake the feeling that when that collision happened, it wasn't just going to be embarrassing for her, it was going to be explosive. The following weekend, everything that had been brewing finally came to a head. Up until then, I had been on edge, constantly glancing at the cabin from my porch, half expecting to see Karen creeping around with her clipboard in the dark. I even caught myself listening at night for footsteps or hushed voices on the gravel path that led down the hill. For a while it was quiet, and I started to think maybe she had bluffed, maybe her cousin had made other arrangements, and maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't the bluffing type. That Friday afternoon, a black SUV rolled quietly up my driveway. No logos, no flashing lights, nothing to suggest anything official, but I knew exactly who it was. Two agents stepped out, dressed casually but with that unmistakable alertness in their posture. They gave me a nod, and I knew what it meant. The cabin was in use tonight. They didn't share details, and I didn't ask. That was part of the agreement. I just handed over the spare key and went back to pretending everything was normal. Inside the cabin, I could see them setting up through the curtains before they pulled them closed. Equipment cases were stacked neatly by the door, laptops glowed on the table, and one of the agents was talking into a small earpiece. Whatever was happening tonight wasn't small. They needed the Safehouse operational, and that meant the place was off limits to anyone who wasn't federal. And of course, that was the exact night Karen decided to make her move. Around 9:30 p.m., I stepped out onto my porch for some fresh air. The night was cool, the stars bright, the kind of peaceful mountain evening that normally clears your head. But then I saw movement down the hill. Two figures, shadows against the dim glow of the moon, creeping along the side path that led straight to the cabin. My stomach dropped. It was Karen, and with her was another woman dragging a rolling suitcase behind her. Even from the distance, I could hear the faint clatter of the suitcase wheels over the gravel. She really did it. She actually brought her cousin here, in the dead of night, to move her in like this was some kind of Airbnb she had personally reserved. I bolted down the porch steps and called out, "Karen! What do you think you're doing?" My voice carried through the stillness of the night. She froze for a second, then looked up with that smug expression plastered across her face, even in the dim light. "I told you, this is community property," she said loudly enough for me to hear. "Don't try to stop us. My cousin needs a place to stay, and your cabin is perfect." I couldn't believe it. She was actually doubling down while trespassing on my land. "Karen, you need to turn around right now. You are not allowed down there," I warned, my voice sharper this time. But before I could take another step, the cabin door swung open. Out stepped one of the FBI agents, calm but firm, his badge glinting as it caught the porch light. He wasn't pointing a weapon, but his hand rested close to his holster. Right behind him, another agent appeared, scanning the area quickly, eyes sharp. "Ma'am," the first agent said, his voice steady and professional, "step away from the property immediately." Karen froze. Her cousin gasped, clutching the handle of the suitcase like it might protect her. For a moment, nobody spoke, the silence so heavy you could hear the leaves rustling in the trees. Karen finally found her voice, though it came out shrill and shaky. What's going on here? Why do you have badges? Why are you in his cabin?" The agent didn't flinch. "This is a federal matter. You need to leave right now." Karen blinked rapidly, her brain clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. Most people, when confronted by federal agents, would back off immediately. But this was Karen. She puffed herself up, planted her hands on her hips, and snapped, "You can't tell me what to do. I'm the head of the HOA." I nearly buried my face in my hands. Did she really just pull the HOA card on the FBI? The agent raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Ma'am, this property is under federal jurisdiction tonight. Unless you want to be charged with trespassing on a federal investigation site, I strongly suggest you leave. Now." Her cousin tugged on her sleeve, whispering frantically, "Karen, let's just go. Please." But Karen dug in her heels. Her voice wavered between anger and fear as she shouted, "This is outrageous. I'll sue all of you. I'll sue the HOA, I'll sue him, I'll sue the FBI if I have to." The second agent calmly pulled out a phone, raised it, and snapped a photo of Karen where she stood. The flash lit up her stunned face. "Perfect," he said coolly. "Now we have your name and face on record. If you interfere again, this will be used as evidence." That shut her up instantly. Her mouth opened, then closed again like a fish gasping for air. She turned bright red, spun around, and grabbed her cousin by the arm so hard the poor woman nearly stumbled. Without another word, she dragged her up the hill, the suitcase bouncing and clattering behind them as they retreated into the night. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The agents glanced at me, gave a small nod of reassurance, and then slipped back inside the cabin, shutting the door firmly behind them. The lights stayed off, the curtains stayed drawn, and the night fell quiet again. As I stood there in the cool air, watching Karen's figure disappear into the distance, I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. I had warned her. I had told her no. And still, she pushed until she found herself face to face with the one authority even she couldn't shout down.